Welcome back to the first of our bonus videos in week 3. The first 4 bonus videos this week are all going to be about what editing in CMYK mode in Photoshop breaks. Friends don't let friends edit in CMYK mode. Now, some of you don't edit in CMYK mode already. You edit in RGB mode, and that's okay, but I'm going to show you there's a glitch there that needs to be corrected thanks to our friends at Adobe and their default settings. Let's get started. I'm going to create a new document, and I'm going to create this document, this new Photoshop baby, and I'm going to watch carefully my little settings here. This image is going to be created as an RGB baby, and I'm going to say create. And if I shift delete, one of the delete sisters, and I fill with 50% gray, I get a 50% gray box. I'm going to do the same thing, but this time I'm going to create a CMYK baby. Otherwise, they're identical. And then let me arrange these two up vertically. All right, so I've got 2 photos, 2 images basically, 2 Photoshop files. And you can see across the top that one is a CMYK baby in 8-bit color. The other is an RGB baby, also in 8-bit color. Here's what I want you to see. The single most important menu item in Photoshop that it seems no one has ever visited or has much of a clue about is under the Edit menu. Edit, Color Settings. Everything you do in Photoshop is reliant upon an accurate rendition of the color settings. You didn't know that, did you? I'm going in. In color settings, the default color settings are North America General Purpose 2. Boy, that's a mouthful. By default, when Adobe ships to you, it's set to this, North America General Purpose 2. And North America General Purpose 2 is basically, you can ignore most of this for now, is basically 2 things. What is the RGB space we're working in? Think of it as a box of crayons, right? Even a kid knows you can't win the coloring contest without a lot of crayons. And if you were to give a child a three-pack of crayons at their local restaurant, or an 8-pack of Crayola, they would take the 8-pack. A kid knows they want to win the contest. But what do they really want? They really want the 256-pack with a built-in sharpener, because a kid knows you can't win the coloring contest without a lot of crayons. Well, sRGB is the default. And I hate to break it to you, but it's the 3-pack at your local Denny's. That's a very tiny box of crayons. I can prove it to you. And that's the way, by the way, that your Photoshop is set to by default. You want to open up your box of crayons. I'm going to hover over that with my cursor, but I got to come back so that you can see what I'm about to show you. At the bottom of this screen, when I hover, when I put my cursor on sRGB, it tells me at the bottom of the screen what the manual, the Photoshop manual, has to say about this item. So I'm going to hover here, but read below, read with me at description, sRGB and a bunch of numbers. Reflects the characteristics of the average CRT display. Hey, what's a CRT display? Does anybody remember or know? A cathode ray tube. Oh, those were those giant monitors that used to go way back on your desktops. No one has used one of those for 25 years. And this box of crayons reflects the characteristics of the average 25-year-old display. Doesn't sound very hopeful. I'll keep reading. This standard space, it's standard, is endorsed by many hardware and software manufacturers and is becoming the default color space for many scanners, low-end printers, and software applications. It's an ideal space for web work, they mean internet work, but not recommended for pre-press work because of its limited color gamut. Wait, what? Not recommended for print because it's a small box of crayons. Wow. That stinks. Now, I'm going to draw your attention to the CMYK department. Because in the CMYK department, it doesn't have any impact, you would think, unless you're editing a CMYK file. But it does. In fact, it drives so much. So watch carefully. I'm just going to say OK on my default settings. And I'm going to fill the screen with black in both cases. And I'm going to open the info bar. Oh, there it is. It's already open. I'm going to pop it out so we can take a peek. It's very important when working on Photoshop documents that you don't exceed, if you're printing now, that you don't exceed something called the total ink limit. And in my info panel, under the first eyedropper, I've said stop showing me the actual color, please, and show me instead the total ink limit. And when I hover over my CMYK baby, it tells me that my total ink limit is 301%. That's not bad. My RGB file, if I edit an RGB and still send it out to print, it says, I'll cover you. I won't let you go over 300. Okay, now let's change something. At the last minute, you find out, color settings, that you're not printing to something called United States Web Press coded paper. No, instead you're printing to the United States on newsprint for an ad in your local newspaper. Your Photoshop file is going to get printed on newsprint. Well, newsprint, when ink hits it, it bleeds a lot more. You know that. It's like a Sharpie marker on toilet paper, right? The ink bleeds. And therefore, this happens. Look at the RGB file since we were there. I can't print 300% total ink, 100 magenta, plus 100 yellow, plus 100 cyan and 100 black. That would be 400% ink. Instead, you can only print 217% total ink. And the RGB file, even though I'm going to edit it and print it later, reflects that new update. RGB, protect me. Do not let me exceed, in this case, 217%. Though a moment ago it said 300 for a different kind of printer. But if you look at the CMYK file, it hasn't budged. It's still 301. Here's the first thing that editing CMYK files break. They cannot be changed for printing. If at the last minute you decide you're printing to a different device or for a different media like newsprint, you cannot change the color settings. It has no result on a CMYK file. It makes no sense. In fact, CMYK file, CMYK in Photoshop ought to stand for change me, you kill me. If you're editing a CMYK file in Photoshop, you cannot change the all-important color settings. They have no impact on a CMYK file. But they do, ironically, have impact only in this RGB document. More in tip 2.